Hello everybody and welcome to the Supercars Exchange podcast. I hope you're all keeping incredibly well. I'm here with Shane again. How are you going, Shane?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going pretty good. Today we're going to be briefly going over the Tasmanian round that just occurred, and then we're going to be talking about some more controversial cars because that's a hot topic at the moment for supercars that occurred in the past. Anyway, let's jump straight into it. With the first race, it was Shell V-Power 1-2. The Mustangs are still up there. They still got it.
Yeah, nothing changed. It was same as usual, but I think it definitely levelled out the playing field a lot more when you look at Triple Eight space. But I think even when we spoke about it during the last podcast, Symmons Plains wasn't going to be the best representation of what the CRG or the new CRG rules would give us, because it's just a very point-and-shoot track with a couple of long straights, a couple of fast-ish corners, and the rest are just slow anyway. So I think, it was always going to be comes down to who can get the best mechanical grip, and as we see, DJR done the best job on Saturday, and as we'll touch on, Triple Eight got it right on Sunday. Yeah,
and I was quite impressed with Mark Winterbottom getting the pole for race 7, where he managed to beat out Scott McLaughlin by the tiniest of margins. It was .004, and he must have set it up for qualifying trim, because he didn't go that far backwards, but he did go backwards during the race. He went from first down to fourth. Just the Mustangs just powered through kind of thing. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with his qualifying performance anyway.
Well, he broke the run of Mustang pole position, so if you've done that, you must have done something right. But I think it was like that for most of the teams across the weekend, where especially for the Saturday, you were just going to race the qualifying car, and then for Sunday you were going to qualify a race car, being the longer race. So I think Mark Winterbottom, he just went all qualifying. Perhaps DJR had a few little tweaks to theirs where they were able to make it a little bit more comfy for the race. But as we've seen, once he got pole, that was a great lap from him. But again, it's always going to be tight at Symmons Plains, being such a short circuit. It's sub 3 Ks. So I think most of the field was only separated by less than a second.
It was less than a second between the entire field, besides from those that didn't set a lap, obviously.
Yeah.
But also what we saw during the qualifying sessions, even though they're only 10 minutes, was they would go out and do a fast lap, and then they would just come back in and say, oh yeah, that's our fast lap, and then just come back in the last 5 minutes and try to change as much over to try and suit a race car kind of thing. Like, there wasn't too many fast laps being set towards the end of the session, because a lot of people were just changing things back over again. So,
yeah, that's right. And it was probably what was going to be the danger by allowing them to make changes during the qualifying session itself. It meant that if you went out there and you set a pretty good time, that you think, well, at least in this knockout type qualifying, if it means you can get through to the next stage, if you're fast enough for that, you're just not going to worry about it. You got to give up on the last 5 minutes, do what you can to make a couple of setup changes going into the next session. And then that'll be the same for the final session as well. If you've got a time that you think, well, that's going to get me on the front row, if not the second row, you're just going to leave it at that. And that was always a danger. And I think we still have plenty of cars out on track, but it could have been a situation if everyone was happy with their first lap, then no one comes out in the last 5 minutes. And it kind of reminded me a bit of Formula One's failed attempt to try and shake up qualifying, and with the knockout one that they had a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden, if you didn't set a good lap on your first lap, well, you just give up and time runs out, and that's all over for you. So we would. Especially for the top 10, you'd have no cars out on track for the last 5 minutes, and it just became a fast.
Yeah.
So I think that they might need a few little tweaks.
Yeah, that qualifying session, sessions I was almost like getting flashbacks of F1. I still have nightmares about that qualifying session. That was just so awful when they did that at Adelaide.
Yeah, that's it. And it was just when you got to with still plenty of time left on the clock, and then you're just sort of waiting and no one's going to come out because they don't have time to pit, put some new tyres on and go back out before they have to start the next lap. Yeah, that's right. I think they've got it right. I definitely like the knockout style qualifying that we've seen in Symmons Plains, and I think we got it again in Barbagallo's the next time we'll see it. And I really enjoy it. Look, it puts a bit more emphasis on that practice session on the Friday to get a fast time, to get into that top 10, because you know it's going to pay you back later by not needing a set of tyres for that first knockout section of qualifying.
Yeah. Also, I was watching some old Symmons Plains races leading up into this weekend, and Jamie Whincup had qualified on the back row back when he was with GOM or something, and Jamie Whincup was also last in the first race of the weekend, where he ended up 25th, losing 10 positions
I
in the
think
race.
he was... he certainly didn't have the best race here. He qualified 15th after making a uncharacteristic error going into the hairpin. Just locked up the rears and round he went, something that you don't normally see from him. And then, just during the race, he got a good start, but then just in an effort to try and pass Mostert, just a tiny bit too deep on the brakes. It was just a racing incident. I think, Mostert started to move over a little bit, just as a kind of a back off Jamie type move. Whincup still went for it. He's entitled to do it. It didn't work out. They bumped wheels, puncture, and back he went.
I think that would be that's a very rare occasion to see Whincup all the way back there.
Yeah, well, even though, I suppose when you go to check out the car, but when he came in, he went straight into the garage, and then they worked out that nothing's wrong with the car. Put a new tyre on it, and off he went. When if they had just done a normal pit stop, they could have pulled the tyre off. Quick little shake of the suspension. That's all fine. Put a new tyre on, off you go. They might not have quite lost as much time as they did.
It was an interesting move by them, I think. Anyway, it was. I think they were trying to just be more safe than sorry. But I thought if you could. Surely if you were able to fix it in the pit lane, well, at least try to, in the normal pit stop, you would just try to do that, just be able to check it like what you just said. But if it wasn't good, you would put it into the garage rather than going into the garage straight away. So maybe Whincup was frustrated or something by it and just decided to go straight into the garage, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe because it happened it happened at turn 6, so he wouldn't have had much time to know if it was flat. He would have been on the grass for pretty much all the way back onto pit lane, so he probably didn't really know if it was broken, bent or not damaged at all. He just probably didn't know, so he's just going into the garage. Maybe the team should have said, no, pull up into the bay first, we'll sit and check it out. If it's good, we'll send you on your way. You may have only lost the one lap, but if it was damaged, then just run it into the pits, because as we see, then he lost 2 laps anyway. So at least making that little bit of a gamble to see if it was just the tyre, and as it turned out, it would have been just the tyre. May have just saved him from that lap, but there was hardly any other incident for the rest of the race anyway, so he still would have finished last anyway.
Yeah. On to the Sunday race, an 84-lap race with the qualifying for that one. We had Shane Van Gisbergen on top, no Mustangs on top. Well, we had Coulthard and then Reynolds, and then Winterbottom with another good qualifying session. A bit of a slower lap than he did on the Saturday, but most likely, as you were saying, probably due to him setting up more as a race car, because it's obviously quite a bit of a longer race with 84 laps. So then we had Van Gisbergen taking out the win, so from flag to flag basically, and then Coulthard behind him, and then Reynolds. So top 3 just stayed the same. So it wasn't the most intriguing race that we've had around Symmons Plains, I guess we can say that. But Whincup made up quite a few positions in that race. He made up 8 positions, so it was at least redeemed himself a little bit from the Saturday race anyway.
Yeah, he certainly he had a better Sunday certainly over what he had in the Saturday. But I think overall, I think I was just surprised that they're yin and yang in pace. Shane Van Gisbergen had fairly good pace all weekend. It did struggle a little bit on the Saturday, but Sunday he was certainly the fastest driver out there.
Yeah.
Coulthard gave him a run for his money, but I think that was just delaying the inevitable there. But Whincup, he just didn't seem to really... he set near lap record speed back on Friday, and all of a sudden we all thought, like I was thinking, looking at the times, like, hang on, they might have done too much to the CAT on the Mustang, but I thought, like, it's just practice, hold up, we'll be patient for at least till the end of the weekend. And then I think they swapped out the engine or something like that, and all of a sudden he just didn't have the same pace. So whether it was, might have been a couple of horsepower less in the engine than the other one, or I read today that they might have been having gear shift issues all weekend. So I don't know. I think it just one of those strange ones. I think it wasn't his weekend. Yeah. Which we've kind of seen from Triple Eight since the start of the season. Like, we have, one driver do well in the first, like on at one track, and then the next track it seems to go back the other way to the other driver. I think Whincup did okay back in Adelaide, and he did okay in Albert Park, and now we've got into Tassie, and it's been Shane Van Gisbergen that's had the better run.
Well, Van Gisbergen just had an awful run of luck with Albert Park anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It was just a weekend to forget.
Yeah. We also had that battle at the end with Winterbottom battling Whincup for 5th position. That was a bit of a throwback to a few years ago with Whincup and Winterbottom battling. I think that was pretty good to see. It was good to see those two battling again. Especially, although Winterbottom backed off a little bit after a few laps after Whincup passed him, probably just to save tyres, I assume, because he just dropped off. Either that or Whincup was just going for it.
Yeah, I think he probably would have been trying to save tyres, but it is good. And it's probably 2 or 3 races now where we've seen Winterbottom and Whincup really going at it on track, which is good to see because it's been a couple of years. And I'll give him back on Saturday's race, like, Winterbottom was right there for the podium until going into the final lap. And, you could just tell that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to close the gap and get past, but he wasn't going to give it up without a fight. He put up a pretty fair old effort in trying to keep him behind. They were certainly rubbing panels, but it was good to see that. It gave us a bit of entertainment, but I think, social media that night was blowing up deluxe at how Shane Van Gisbergen, how dare he pass Winterbottom, but it's like, hang on, they're meant to be racing. Like, I'm disappointed that Winterbottom didn't get the podium either, but you can't, it's Van Gisbergen's going to still be there for a championship. In the end, I don't think Winterbottom will be. He might be. I could be surprised yet, but I think, you can't afford to just give up a position because, for this nostalgia of letting Winterbottom have a podium. So he had to go for it.
Yeah. Also, throughout the weekend, the only Mustangs that were really up there were the Shell V-Power Mustangs. Most of the other Mustangs were like towards the bottom end of the top 10 or lower. So it could possibly mean that Shell V-Power has really jumped on top of Symmons Plains, where Symmons Plains is usually more Commodore circuit, as we were talking about in the previous podcast. So the other Mustangs just weren't really there most of the weekend, whereas in the previous couple rounds we've seen them right up there in the top 10 most of the time.
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest surprises. I thought, like, okay, well, like, a lot of people will probably just go straight to the COG thing and say that's the reason, and like that, no doubt that's had something to do with it. You can't make a big change like that and move 28 kilos from the floor to the roof and not expect the car to feel different. So no doubt that's had an impact. But again, it's all meant to be even now, so I think that might be a bit more representative of their pace. But again, Symmons Plains, it's a hard one to tell because it's just such a different circuit to a lot of the other ones that we'll be getting to over the next few months. So it's hard. I think it just could be a bad round. They might just write it off and say, well, we gave it a crack and we try to pull get as much as we can out of the weekend. I think Mostert will be disappointed because his qualifying wasn't quite right. He was saying that they're just struggling to get the car together for one lap, but during the race they've got pretty decent race pace. Which we've seen Lee Holdsworth. He had a disappointing qualifying on Sunday, I think it was, and he actually climbed 10 positions, I think, throughout the race to have a decent finish. Which we've seen up until now. He's actually struggled with race pace a bit, where he's sort of qualified poorly and just stayed in the mid pack and hasn't really moved forward. This time he actually started towards the back and was able to get up at least to around the top end, top 10.
Yeah, so
and made a better race of it.
with Mostert, he dropped from second position all the way down to sixth position in the championship. So even though it's early days, obviously in the championship, he's dropped some critical points in these early rounds. Since he was right up there at the beginning of the season, challenging McLaughlin, but he's just dropped off a little bit now. So
yeah, absolutely. But when it's this early in the season, one bad race, you'll lose 6 positions. Yeah. One good race, you'll climb 6 positions. So when everybody's still really close at this stage of the season, after Albert Park, Van Gisbergen was well outside of the top 10. Now he's back up to 4th or 5th or something like that. So, it's all going to be chopping and changing a little bit, but. We've still seen McLaughlin started off on top, and he still leads now, and he's growing the gap despite not having a good Sunday. He's extended the gap over Whincup, and now we've seen Coulthard's now stepped up to second in the championship. So it's nearly a full race worth of points now. 130 something points, I think, was the gap.
24 now, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not too far off that 150-point buffer that you'd certainly like to have up your sleeve. And not to mention he's already had that one DNF, or did not start already this year as well. So which I think cost him about 70 points, I think, for the race win there. So if he was to win it, but you would have thought he would have. But so he certainly could have been a lot higher up on points than what he is at the moment.
Yeah, so speaking of the championship, at the moment it's McLaughlin, Coulthard, Whincup, Van Gisbergen, and then Reynolds, consistently 5th. He's had even in the previous year, he's been consistently around the 5th or 6th mark. It's at one point he was up to 4th, but he's always just hovering just around that point around most of the season. And then we have Mostert in 6th after dropping down from 2nd, and then Winterbottom. He's currently sitting in 7th, so he's had a couple good performances over the last couple of rounds, and both of us have been pretty impressed with him. He's especially considering he's changed teams. He's just performed very well.
Yeah, he's been the surprise package of the year. I think, as we spoke about earlier, moving to a team like Team 18, going from a 4-car team like Tickford that has a lot of resources behind it. You've got a garage full of other very good drivers with you to go into a team where it's you and no one else that's going to be getting the results for the team. I think he's done an exceptional job all year.
Yeah.
So, especially with that pole on the weekend.
Yeah. So would you call him your top performer from the weekend then?
I think so. I think you'd have to give it to him. He got the pole position. He narrowly missed out on a podium in the dying stages of Saturday. Sunday was a little bit hit and miss, but he started well and finished well. He was putting plenty of pressure on the DJR cars earlier in the race. And had a really good battle with Whincup towards the end. So it was nothing flashy, but just for results alone, I think he's been the top performer. It's hard to give the honourable mentions out. Like if you're on the 3-2-1 system, Whincup Winterbottom gets the 3. But for the 2 and the 1, where do you go? Do you go to Van Gisbergen because he Saturday was pretty good, and then Sunday he broke through and got that first race win for Holden for the year? Do you go for Coulthard because he got back-to-back seconds for the weekend, or McLaughlin for getting the win on the Saturday, but then he was not even on the podium on the Sunday? So it's a tough one on who the second best and third best driver are for the weekend. I think I'd probably have to go Van Gisbergen just for breaking through that to get that first win for Holden for the year, and then Coulthard for getting 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's probably... I was actually about to go the same people as well. Despite the fact that Winterbottom didn't get, the most points on the weekend, the fact that he was able to... Well, basically, he's dragging that Team 18 car up there, because that's a last year spec kind of car. And he's managing to get good results pretty consistently so far. And then, obviously, I go Van Gisbergen in getting the 2 points just because he was podiums all round for the weekend, and then Coulthard in with 1 point. He whereas McLaughlin fell away, Coulthard was able to take up the slack for Shell V-Power and managed to get those 2 seconds.
Yeah, well, he stepped up all year with his pace. We've seen last year, he started off okay. He got a race win at Winton. It was a bit fortuitous with getting that win. But, we, especially in the back half of the season, it just really fell away for him. And he was still finishing in the top 10, which was more than what could be said for the other Ford teams that were, or Ford drivers that were barely featuring in the top 10 for a lot of the season, really. But, you expected more from Coulthard last year, and it just didn't happen. And there was starting to be a lot of pressure being put on him about his future in the team. And this year he's definitely stepped up. He's had that unlucky streak that we'd seen him have a bit last year as well. He's had a couple of run-ins with Van Gisbergen and just had a little bit of bad luck. But when it's gone good for him, he's finished well.
Yeah. So that just about wraps up our summary of Tasmania. So next up, we're going to be talking about some controversial cars from the past. The first 2 cars, which are from the Australian Touring Car Championship, so back in the late 80s, early 90s. We'll talk about the Ford Sierra RS500 and the Nissan Skyline. I'd say probably 2 of the most controversial cars that have come out of racing in Australia. Would you say that?
Oh, definitely. The Skyline in particular, still a bit of a sore point for some people. Like, you have to give it credit. It was an absolute ripper of a car, and still, it's still a car that even today, like as the road going car goes, that a lot of people still want to get their hands on, because it was fantastic back out then, and it's still great now. And as a race car, it was just it was almost unstoppable.
Yeah. So first up, we had the Ford Sierra RS500 in 1988. Which was just a tiny little 4-cylinder turbocharged car. So it was nothing massively amazing, but the car just flew. It was just an absolute machine, despite it being such a small car, just because of how light it was. But they also had issues with actually keeping the back end on the ground, because there was just not enough downforce there. That's why they have that big wing on the back window there, just because it would start lifting when it got to higher speeds. So, and also John Bowe has said that driving the Ford Sierra was like driving a car that was trying to kill you constantly. So it doesn't sound like it was the best car to drive in the end.
No, but it's. I think it was just the speed was what they wanted. I think even Dick Johnson, he was one that came out and used to say it a lot. He said, because it had such a massive turbo on it, I'm pretty sure it might have been similar size to the engine itself. It was a massive turbo, and it would, like, you'd put the foot down to get out of a corner, and you'd have like no horsepower. It just wouldn't want to go, and then all of a sudden you'd get the boost would start picking up, and all of a sudden you've got, like, it feels like you got 600, and it just wants to start skating all over the place, and it was really a handful. So the trick for them was they had to relearn how to drive cars like that, having such a big turbo. They really had to keep the revs up to try and make sure they're trying to stay on the boost, and not kill off any too much speed. Otherwise they'll just if they lose the boost, they lose all the speed. So they have to try and keep the boost there as much as they could, like any turbocharged car, and then that way they could just they could really power off into the distance. Yeah,
it was just I've driven this that Ford Sierra RS500 in the lead up to this podcast on obviously not in real life, because I don't have that kind of money, just on my simulator, just with my wheel and my pedals and all that. And it's just so incredibly difficult to drive. You're just going sideways around every single corner. But let's talk a little bit about how incredibly dominant this car was. It in the 1988 Touring Car Championship, Australian Touring Car Championship, when they hosted 9 rounds, the Ford Sierra won every single one. It won every single race. So people complaining about the Mustang being too dominant have got nothing on this car. Literally every single one it won. So you had no chance unless you had a Sierra, basically.
Yeah, well, that's it. It would have basically just come down to power to weight. Like such a powerful little engine in quite a small car. You know, when you look at a picture, especially a road-going version, it looks very unassuming. It does. It's not a very attractive car. Like very desirable now, and happily have one in my garage if again I had the money for a top end one. But it was, you wouldn't think that this car's going to be any good on a racetrack, and it just decimated everyone.
Yeah, there's actually a Ford Sierra for sale in my hometown. So if anyone wants to sponsor us and let us drive a Ford Sierra, hit us up and let us know. Then in the '89 season, it was only 8 rounds, so they went back down a little bit. And the Sierra won every round besides from Winton, where the Skyline won. So that was the first kind of inkling that we had of the Skyline. It was the Nissan Skyline HR31 GTSR. So that's the one that they actually began running in the touring car category. And then in 1990, it was more of a crossover point, so it was a little bit more equal, but it was just the absolute ridiculous cars of the Sierra and the Skyline just destroying everyone, basically. Peter Brock was even driving a Ford Sierra at that point, just because he wanted to win, because you couldn't do anything unless he had one of those cars, basically.
Yeah, that's it. And that was also around the same time that he's falling out with Holden, and he went to all different cars as well. He had Volvos for a little while. I think he even had a Lada at one stage. It was a strange, interesting time for Brocky, but he definitely had a crack at the Sierras, and I don't think he had a lot of success in it compared to certainly Dick Johnson and John Bowe, but it was, especially the Ford fans would have been rejoicing for that couple of years he was running around in a Sierra.
Yeah. So the Sierra also had a couple Bathurst wins. Just wait.
88 and 89.
Yep, 88 and 89 were the wins for the Ford Sierra back then.
I mean, Tony Longhurst and somebody in 88, and then Johnson and Bowe in 89.
Yeah, so those ones, the Bathurst back then wasn't actually run as part of the touring car series. So it was a race that was actually at the end of the season. So that means it actually ran under different regulations, which meant for the Skyline that they could actually impede the Skyline a little bit more.
Yeah, well, in '92 when the Skyline was just all dominating then, like huge twin turbo V6, all-wheel drive, just had miles more horsepower than anybody else, as well as all-wheel drive. You know, it had front and rear wings, spoilers, which most other teams did not have. So it was just, all-wheel drive already gave it a big enough advantage, then add a bit of extra front downforce and rear downforce. Certainly by today's standards, it wouldn't have been that great, but even a little bit is better than having none at all. So they just had this big advantage. That going into '92, I think they gave them 40 kilos for the championship. But once the championship was all said and done, I think for Bathurst in '92, they gave them 100 kilos weight penalty, which is massive. That's more than the average extra person stuck to somewhere else in the car, which I'm not sure where they would have. They probably weren't complaining as much about center of gravity back in those days as what we have now. They probably just let it go wherever it wants to go. But that's a huge disadvantage to be handed, to have that a massive amount of extra weight given to them, and they were still quite fast. I think in the start of that race, they had a disappointing qualifying in '92. There was some issues. They started 11th, but then within laps they were up to the front, and then just sort of stayed up towards that end for the rest of the day.
And then that was the '92, of course, was the very, very controversial Bathurst 1000, where there was the was it hail or was it just rain in '92?
I think there may have been a little bit of of hail, but I think from division I remember watching, and like I was quite young at the time, and this was well before you were born.
Yeah.
It just absolutely hammered down. And so, yeah, when you look at the technology of race cars back then versus, tyre technology versus the track and the weather, cars had just started to go off everywhere. They were like coming out of Forest Elbow, cars were just they were just losing it everywhere, and it just became a big pile-up. And that was the big controversy for the Skyline, was that the decision had already been made that they were going to get rid of turbocharged cars for the following year. And then I think a lot of people were already starting to hate on the likes of the Sierra and the Nissan in particular, just because the Nissan had such a big advantage in its technology as far as all-wheel drive and twin turbo, everything like that. And then the red flags come out as the Skyline finds itself in the wall, and everyone thought, oh, that's great, the race is over. Johnson and Bow were in second at the time, and everyone sort of started to think that, they've won because the other car crashed out, and then they'd done the old, being the international rules as it was, they counted back 2 laps when Richards and Scaife were in the lead, and that was it. They won the race, and hence the infamous pack of assholes call from Richards on top of the podium.
I just really love the vision of Mark Scaife standing up there with Richards, and Mark Scaife just looks so
pretty horrified.
He's really horrified when Richards says that.
Yeah, that's it.
Hilarious.
It's a deer in the headlights. He's just the way he's looked of like, oh my god, he just said that, and he looks like he's about 12, and when you see the footage of it. It's like he's looking up at his dad when his dad's having a crack at someone at the pub or whatever, and he's like, "What are you saying, Dad? Like, why are you doing that?" And like, it was just one of the. It's almost one of those races that they should have just gone, you know what? We shouldn't have worried about it. Just we'll go home. It didn't happen. We'll pretend it didn't happen. We'll come back in a week and we'll do it again, because the race already had a bit of a sour note on it, because that was the race where New Zealand F1 champ Danny Holm passed away. He had a heart attack coming down Conrod Straight, and
really?
he passed away in hospital. Yeah, it was already tinged with sadness for the race, because New Zealand's only Formula One world champion, and certainly a very, very popular driver amongst the paddock, and they were in a decent position at the time, but he just came out onto Conrod Straight and said that I'm not seeing too well, and then he pulled off to the side of the track, and car was sort of bouncing off the wall a little bit.
Yeah,
and that was ended up being a really sad moment through that race, and then obviously the controversy hit even more later, so it should have just been.
It was just an awful
forget
race.
About it.
Awful race in the end. It was. Was also pretty just briefly going back to the Skyline, sorry, not the Skyline, the Sierra, they're both S cars. Going back to the Sierra, that car wasn't even sold in Australia at the time. It wasn't even sold.
No, that was probably one of the bigger controversies out of it, was that you couldn't rock up at a Ford dealership and say, hey, I want one of what Dick's got out in the track.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that. There's certainly a few that have found their way out to Australia now, but certainly as far as walking into a Ford dealership saying, I want a Sierra, it didn't happen, which is, Ford probably missed a step there. They probably should have, seeing how dominant it was on the track, they probably should have said, all right, this, it was certainly better than the Ford Laser at the time. Maybe the Sierra would have been all right on the showroom floors. Yeah.
With the Sierra not even being sold in Australia, I think they missed the part where you win on Sunday and then sell on Monday. They couldn't even sell it on Monday. They could, even if they did win on Sunday.
That's it. It's like, we can't give you a Sierra, but we've got this Laser, or we can stick you in a Falcon, or whatever else they had at the time. I don't think they would have had much more than those couple of cars.
The Falcon.
Maybe
the Falcon wasn't even. Sorry.
The Falcon. It wasn't really back in the series. Like you'd see a couple maybe, but they were way at the back. If you weren't in the Sierra, you weren't doing well in a Ford anyway.
The Falcon wasn't even very good back then. It wasn't a very attractive looking car at all. Maybe just the 90s were just not a very good time for car design. For Ford.
Oh well, that's it. Well, when the Fords right through the 80s didn't really change a hell of a lot. They, certainly, I think, if you compared to the early model Commodores, they were very much on par. There's certainly no technology in the cars. The Falcon's biggest selling point was its sheer size over the Commodore back then. But but they did have a few that certainly stepped up as far as technology. The XF ESP, I think it was called, the Fairmont. It had quite a few features to it that you wouldn't expect in a car, certainly an Australian-made car at that era. So it was. It wasn't a complete write-off for the Falcon, but as far as racing goes, it didn't progress beyond the showroom floors. It just wasn't a race car back then.
Yeah, it's just interesting to look back on these controversies and think about how incredibly ridiculous everyone would blow up if this kind of thing happened today. Like a car that's not even sold in Australia. Well, I guess the Falcon and the Commodore aren't really a thing anymore, but a car coming over from Europe that's this crazy turbocharged four-cylinder just destroying everyone, and it's not even sold here. And then with the Skyline as well, with what was really innovative technology, and with the all-wheel drive and the massive, well, for the time, spoilers on it, everyone would have just blown up today about it. Like, how was this kind of thing let into this category? So Group A rules obviously were very easily manipulated by Nissan and Ford at the time.
Yeah, that's it. Back then, essentially, it was mainly just it was mainly an engine formula. So it was mainly, if you're going to be in Group A, it's above X amount, and Group B is going to be below a certain amount.
Yeah.
Then we had Group C and all that sort of stuff. So it was mainly the engine size that dictated what group you're in. It didn't matter what else you did to the car after that, which is why we've seen Nissan be able to bring out a twin turbo all-wheel drive 6-cylinder car when the rest of them didn't have that. Now certainly if we've seen if BMW said, oh yeah, we're going to come and have a crack at supercars, and they bring their own twin-turbo V6 over and they think, oh, well, actually, we've got this all-wheel drive technology we want to have a crack at too. Can we use that? It would be a pretty quick no as far as that would be allowed. But, it's back then, but that was just how the rules were at that stage.
Yeah.
That's what we had, such an array. And some people miss those days, and understandably so, because we had such an array of manufacturers, and even multiple cars from same manufacturers as well. So, there was a time when you would see, the Falcon was still racing, but it was, again, well at the back, and you had the Sierra up the front, and Nissan, I think, had the Bluebird running alongside the Skyline for a couple of years there too. So, it was never going to be as good as the Skyline, but it was running right along there with it, and so it wasn't uncommon to see a lot more manufacturers. We had BMW, we had Volvo, we had Audi, back in those through the late-ish 80s into the 90s. So there was some people miss those days of having that many manufacturers on the grid.
So with just on your topic of multiple manufacturers having multiple different models in the 92 season, I'm just looking here, Toyota had a Supra Turbo, they had three Corollas, and then also a Sprinter, which is basically just an AE86 for the Australian market. So they had, obviously those are privateers, besides from, I think, there was no Toyota team at the time, but they were just privateers, but people were able to run those kind of cars, multiple different cars, and it's just, it's such great variety in touring cars back then anyway.
Yeah, that's it, and that lived up to what it was meant to be about, was touring cars. We see that now with, for anyone who watches British touring cars, you've still got, a whole array of different manufacturers, and you might only see 2 or 3 different cars from each manufacturer on the grid, but they're going hell for leather. That they've tightened up the way they do things. They're all very similar horsepower, and I'm not sure if they're turbocharged or not, but all front wheel drive. So it's it's very close racing, and on any given day, any of those drivers can win, and that's why it's still that sort of bash 'em, crash 'em style racing, because they can, cheap parts will just get back into it next weekend.
Yeah.
And that's what people loved about the old style touring car racing, was that you had such a different array of cars, cars that would be, flat out down the straight, but when you got to a corner, they just didn't want to turn corners.
Yeah.
And then you'd have the opposite. You had cars that were rocket ships around corners, but had no straight line speed.
Yeah.
So you had that opposite that would, you'd fly past them on the straights, but they're going to catch right up through the twisty stuff again. So that's the good old days that people do miss a lot.
What's interesting is that this year there's going to be 2 Australian touring car categories launched here. I'm not too sure how many rounds they're actually doing, but the fact that they're launching 2 in the same year goes to show there's quite a bit of interest actually in touring cars, hopefully, in Australia, in order for those to stay afloat. So maybe in a few years' time we might see a really big touring car category in Australia again. Maybe they'll combine those 2, but we might even see possibly a combination of supercars and touring cars for the Bathurst 1000, like it used to be, with the V8 rules and the touring car rules when they were combined back a few years back. So that would be pretty interesting to see that back again.
We've got the TCR Championship, which we're starting to see even quite a few of the supercars teams already starting to. I think Gary Rogers Motorsport was one of the first to jump across. Yeah. I think even Kelly Racing might be in on it as well. I still won't put it past someone like a Tickford starting up a Ford Focus team. It's going to be great racing to watch, because it'll be they're going to be very close in terms of their overall speed, and you got to have several different manufacturers, and that'll be quite exciting. I don't think we're going to see. Mainly because they are very much a competitor to supercars, I don't think we're going to see them holding hands when it comes to Bathurst. I think supercars will defend that to the death to keep it theirs, and that's one thing that supercars in the end fought for, was to have they wanted to have this parity category like we have now. And the Bathurst is all theirs. That's what they want. They want Bathurst. Like we see, they might certainly link up with into the Bathurst 6 hour that we see. That's not too far away. I don't think it might even be this weekend. I think I don't think TCR and supercars will hold hands anytime soon when it comes to sharing an event. Like even at Albert Park, they were using a TCR car for the speed comparison, and they didn't show that weekend on any of the coverage. They didn't want to go near it because they didn't want to give any publicity to a car that wasn't a supercar. When any other time when they've used a supercar in that thing, that was the first thing they'll show. They left it well alone this year.
It's interesting because obviously obviously it's always over on social media the way that they're just talking about how like it's not a Commodore anymore, it's just an Opel. So they've got all those Opels. You probably love that, don't you?
It's it gives me a bit of a chuckle. Like it's a Holden, but not really.
Yeah, well,
I think it's even funny that Scott McLaughlin's jumped on that bandwagon now. He's happy to. He's spoken about them being Opels more than Holdens a little bit lately.
Yeah, so this has actually turned into a Ford supporting podcast now, guys. We're completely biased towards Ford, but yeah. Well, obviously we've got the Mustang now in Australia, which is good to see, a representative of the commercial market. But for something that's actually a Ford rather than the fake Commodore kind of thing.
Rebadged Opel.
Yeah, basically. But like, I don't know how long that's going to stay relevant for this current formula, considering that Mustang obviously is not the most attractive and it doesn't fit to this kind of chassis. We've really tangent off into the chassis kind of region now. But yeah, it doesn't really fit to that chassis. So I don't know whether they will possibly, if they make a Camaro supercar, whether they might change the formula over, hopefully, to maybe suit a kind of like a more two-door car, like obviously the Camaro and the Mustang. But then you kind of leave Nissan in the dark, but don't think they're going to be around much longer anyway.
No, the big theory is now, or this, the Kellys have come out and said that they can certainly run the Ultima again next year, but there's already quite a few rumours because they've given up on getting a new manufacturer now. So their big rumour is that they're going to end up back in Commodores next year, which would be a pretty easy transition for them. They've done it before, run Commodores, but I would not put it past them that they've sent a sneaky email away to Ford inquiring about the possibility of getting some Mustangs next year. I think that they'll be crazy not to at least put it forward. If Ford can see another 4 slots that could be filled by Mustangs next year, I'm sure they'll happily take it.
Yeah, they just want more Mustangs on the grid because obviously there's only 6 at the moment, so the more the merrier, really. And obviously,
it was a big rumor today actually that I read that. Yeah,
I saw that one.
It's the Tim Blanchard one, the Cool Drive car may end up being a Mustang next year. That they're going to leave the Brad Jones Racing stable and jump across to the Mustang. So that we've already, again, that looks fairly confirmed from what I was reading. Not confirmed, but it's a pretty strong rumour from what I read. And so we've got the first of the sort of back markers, I guess you could say, of the teams lower down the order, wanting to at least try something different.
Yeah, Nick Percat and Tim Slade have been performing pretty well for Brad Jones Racing this year, so obviously they're taking steps in the right direction with the Commodore, but obviously Brad Jones Racing hasn't got the most up-to-date technology, but they're certainly punching up there for a team that's not like one of the top-tier kind of teams, but yeah.
Yeah, well, they took a bit of a step back in Symmons Plains. They weren't quite as far up as I thought they were going to be. We've seen Erebus make a big step forward in between Albert Park and Symmons Plains. Brad Jones they dropped back that little bit, but again, it's the style of circuit. It was probably not going to allow. It probably was going to go back to the order that we normally have seen over the past couple of years. Just where Twin Springs weren't going to have a huge impact. Aero wasn't going to have a huge impact. Center of gravity wasn't even going to have a huge impact. So maybe next time out of Phillip Island, we'll see them back up the top.
Yeah, hopefully. I think that's just about it, really. Unless you have anything else to say.
Well, I think because we went off on our own tangent, I think we didn't mention how controversial the last couple of cars have been in the sport, but we might make that a part 2 for next week. Yeah. We'll spread it out.
Well, it's just the ZB that you wanted to talk about, hey?
Yeah, we've seen. Well, I suppose we've already touched on how controversial the Mustang has been this year. It's such a big step forward over the Falcon in terms of how low they're able to get that center of gravity. Certainly, the styling has been an issue because it doesn't look quite the same as the road-going car. Obviously, the roll cage has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of other tweaks that they made to it to give it a better, just better straight line speed, I guess. But I think once the new rules are out, they will change that in a heartbeat. If it means that they could get a Camaro in the category, they will change those rules in a heartbeat to allow that in there. If any other teams want to run a sedan, they'll still be able to do it. It'll just mean that it'll just have a longer glass house on top of the car as opposed to what the coupes will have. But if they're able to redesign, Ford no doubt will redesign the Mustang to have its normal sort of shaped roof, which would surely you'd think would be better for aero again. So I would think that would be the first thing they would do if they changed the rules.
Yeah.
But it goes back to the ZB. Like that's they're the ones that sort of kicked it off in a way because they last year that was the big thing. They had this car that had the carbon composite panels when everybody else was running the old steel panels, and by having that, they were able to put all the extra weight on the floor, and they had this, such better car as far as COG was concerned. They allowed Ford and Nissan to catch up a bit by running those composite panels themselves. But as we've seen with the changes, they've had to add weight to the top of their car too, so it was an advantage that they were able to keep all year. And it was interesting today that Ryan Wilkinshaw come out and actually defended the Mustang, saying, "Well, they've just done a better job. Good on them." Well, he didn't like the idea that supercars may change what they do with the aero. They cancelled the test for in between Symmons Plains and Phillip Island, but it's something that they may look at again later in the year. And Ryan Wilkinshaw's come out and said, "No, don't do it because that's unfair on them. They've done such a good job of designing that. No doubt over time, Holden will find a way to even that up a bit. Maybe at season's end, they say, okay, well, you've had that season. We'll make a couple of changes now." Even another controversial car was right at the start of when it was just became the 5-litre category between Ford and Holden. The EB Falcon had such an advantage with aero that they actually shaved off part of the rear wing so it didn't have the same downforce. And it was they were making all, and they just chopped and changed. Like they were all taking more and more wing off the car to try and level the playing field. When suddenly they've realised that, hang on, we're not controlling this, and that's when eventually they had Project Blueprint, which come out for the start of I think it was 2001. It might have been 2002, perhaps. So that was where we've seen the first steps of them actually saying, no, we want to put all this together and have parity. And obviously, centre of gravity had not been one of those issues that they looked at until now, and that's where we've seen Holden. They took that big step last year. The other two manufacturers had pretty big issue with it, understandably, and we've seen that this year. The Mustang took an even bigger step, and the other two manufacturers again said, "Hey, what about us?" And they've made these changes. So, it'll rage on all year.
I think we'll probably look back on the time this kind of era with the ZB and the Mustang pretty similar to what we did with just now with the Sierra and the Skyline, with how controversial they are. Obviously not as controversial as the Sierra and the Skyline, but just cause just as much drama, especially on social media and everything. It's just, I think a lot of people just kind of blow it out of proportion in the situations.
I think so. Like back then, obviously no social media, so you would have seen the race. You would have blown up about it at home. You might have winched to your kids or whatever you're going to do. And, you got to talk about it with your mates down the pub next weekend or whatever. But now, the second something bad happens, you're just straight onto Facebook, or you're all over Twitter, and it's just out there. Like you just watch it. You just wait for a post to pop up. And it's within seconds. You've got the Holden fans doing their best to defend Holden. You've got the Ford fans doing their best to defend Ford. And maybe the odd Nissan fan. I don't know how many are out there. I don't even know if it's plural. It might just be one. I'm not sure. Yeah, there's a few out there. Well, you do see the odd shirt walking around town, but it's few and far between.
Kelly Racing comes out and defends themselves most of the time. Kelly Racing responds to... I've actually seen them respond to Facebook comments before, which is pretty interesting to see. So they actually go through and read all those kind of crazy comments.
That's it. Yeah, the social media advisor at Kelly Racing's all over it. He's doing his best to stand up for the team. But we've seen that. That David Reynolds doing he put up a couple of posts on a couple of them. Scott McLaughlin, he put up a post to say he was not liking that about the changes with COG, and he responded to a couple of posts that were put up there, and it's like, wow, the drivers are getting involved now. It's now it's personal now. They're really hating all this at the moment too. So. As much as I didn't like the idea of evening up the COG, I think if you built the better car, well, you've earned the better car. Yeah. But but since they changed it, wow, it's every day is just entertaining. You just can't wait to jump on Facebook at the start of the day and see what so and so's written about this, and all the different articles that are written. And it's all crazy.
My favourite game is to go onto the Supercars Facebook page and just read through those comments. I enjoy tagging you in some of them sometimes. They're just great to read sometimes.
Yeah, that's it. I get more of a laugh out of them than anything. Yeah. Well, I think I spent most of the weekend, especially Friday when Ford didn't get the best start in practice. But again, it's just practice. The race, the Tickford cars were a bit further back, and Facebook was alight with COG this and COG that, and I just had to try and remind, especially the Ford fans, to say, look, they didn't add 28 kilos to the car.
Yes.
We're not 28 kilos heavier than the rest of the field. We just had to move the weight from the floor to the roof, and everything's okay. Again, the Holdens had to move 7 kilos from the floor to the roof. Everybody is supposed to be even. They'll change it a little bit here and there, but we're all supposed to be even now. So whoever does the best job on the weekend is the one that does the best job.
Yeah, it's just like that meme that's been circulating for ages where it says they've added 28 kilos and he still wins. It's like, come on, let's just read the articles for once and you'll realise what's actually going on.
Yeah, that's it.
Listen to the Supercars Exchange podcast and you'll know what's going on.
Well, that's it. You'll be the most informed.
That's it.
At the moment, our 10 listeners are probably ecstatic.
Yeah.
That they're learning more and more about the sport every day.
That's it. You learn about previous controversies that were a lot more controversial than what's going on now.
Yeah, that's it. Although, mind you, the last 20 minutes we've kind of just gone off on our own ramble. We've forgotten that the podcast is recording. Look,
I think this one's been pretty good, to be honest.
It has. We've certainly covered a lot of ground.
Well,
and we get to do it all over again next week because we've only got 1 week between rounds.
I'm excited.
How good.
I'm excited. I don't have uni next week, so I'm pretty keen to just be able to jump straight into it. So it's going to be good. So thank you very much for joining me today. Mate. This has been awesome.
We'll do this again next week.
Join us again next week. Thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you later.